Krishna Gade. I'm the founder CEO of Fiddler. We are an enterprise AI observability startup in the Bay Area. I'm here to talk to you about how AI observability can help fully unlock the potential of large language models. I think like me, I guess you probably are all sort of looking at the generative AI landscape and potentially drinking the Kool-Aid. Right? This is essentially a graph that's showing AI adoption worldwide over the last few years. And you can see for the first few years, it's been kind of steady. And then last 1.5 years, there's just like hockey stick growth that you're seeing. And largely contributed by generative AI. And the technology around the transformation model architecture and the advances that the foundation model companies are making are mind-boggling, right? The other day, I don't know how much of you have watched the OpenAI Dev Day, the kind of innovation that they've shown in terms of, speech-to-speech generation, and there's like basically a generative AI now can generate a full-blown podcast if you give it like a piece of text where a man and a woman could be talking about it. And I listened to one of those podcasts, and I could not recognize if it's actually real or fake. So the technology is here for us, and I think it's already finding a lot of amazing applications across customer service, marketing, and whatnot. But I'm here to tell you more about how it can fail in mysterious ways and can hurt enterprise adoption. And I don't know if you have followed some of the stories in the last few months on how AI failures have gave enterprises a pause to look at, how this generative AI applications are working, what are some of the protective measures that they have to look into. One of the more popular examples is the Air Canada chatbot issue. So Air Canada launched a generative AI-based chatbot for their customer service, and it basically hallucinated for one of the questions a passenger was asking in terms of a refund policy. And that became a big brand PR issue and a litigation. And we are seeing this across the board. There was a chatbot that was jailbroken and made to utter like racist comments. So ultimately, for enterprises to use AI in like say wealth management or customer service or business operations, you really need to build trust, right? You need to know that this is not going to go off the rails and it's going to perform with certain amount of confidence. And so those are the concerns that are in some ways blocking enterprises or having them pause to adopt LLMs. While we have this magnificent technology that is just capable of doing amazing things, but there are these risks around how is it working in production, whether its responses are safe and satisfactory, whether it accidentally leaks any private information, because these generative AI models can memoize training data, and so you can jailbreak into them and extract personally identifiable information like emails, phone numbers. How accurate are these responses? Because one aspect of generative AI is it's very creative, and the result of it is it can also make up things and hallucinate. So how do you make sure that the responses are highly accurate? Is there a bias in it? And then how robust it is to different changes in your questions. So today, these are some of the concerns that also affect your regulatory posture. And if you kind of look at the worldwide regulations, whether it's EU AI Act or recently launched California AI Act, they all talk about the transparency around AI. One of the recent bills that got passed in California AI Act is asking for generative AI products to declare what source contents that they have used to create this response. So almost like a content attribution policy. And so all in all, what you really need is a set of trust standards to build these generative AI applications, right? What are those? Here are some things that we have listed. First of all, when you're building these generative AI applications, like people want to make sure that there is secure data retrieval, that you're able to retrieve these PII data sets in an anonymized fashion, and you want to be able to ground your responses. There's this aspect of hallucinations that will always be there with these generative AI, because no matter how accurate they become, they'll always be, the creative aspect of it will always make them, make up things. So how do you make sure that your responses are grounded? How do you mask your data? How do you defend against jailbreaking attacks? Because now as companies are thinking about putting up generative AI applications, you can have hackers, you can have basically people that can try to jailbreak into your chatbots, extract information that is sensitive to companies. Toxicity detection. How can you make sure that your responses coming out of your generative AI applications are safe and they're not racist, they're not abusive to your users? And then how do you make sure you have an audit trail when you actually develop all of these things? So that essentially makes up for this new building block in your AI stack, what we call AI observability. So it's not sufficient to just have your data ready for training models. You have fantastic generative AI modeling platforms to train your models, but you also need an observability layer, almost like a watchdog that sits on top of your AI stack and continuously monitors the inputs and outputs that you're feeding to these generative AI applications and gives you the assurance, the confidence that your AI applications are performing well, they're not toxic, they're secure. And so that's what we've been working on at Fiddler. We started the company 6 years ago. We started in the pre-generative AI era, in the machine learning world, where you still have problems around performance monitoring or bias monitoring. But now, with generative AI, we see this need for AI observability is much more. So the way to think about AI observability is, when you actually are running these models on your favorite AI stack, how do you make sure that you can actually get high performance from them? Because how do you make sure your models are highly accurate? Let us say you're building like a customer-facing chatbot. One of our customers wants to make sure that their client and the customer, they're basically a marketplace. They want to make sure that the marketplace interactions between customers are not getting out of hand. And when the customer support team gets into a conversation where there is a conflict resolution issue, they can summarize it. So they're developing generative AI apps to do this summarization. But then the summarization has to be accurate, right? It cannot make up things. So the customer support agent should get the right answers from the chatbot application. Similarly, you want to make sure that you're reducing cost. Generative AI, while it's all glamorous, it's pretty expensive. The GPUs are expensive, the LLM costs, the training costs, the inference costs are expensive. So you want to make sure that you are getting the ROI. You're moving the needle for your business. And that's another thing that observability can help you. Make sure that, are my customers happy with this customer service LLM application? Or are my internal teams happy with the way that they're getting answers to their questions? And then finally, it helps you be responsible. It helps you build AI governance, essentially around guardrails around AI, explainability, and bias detection. So what we are providing is a single platform that helps you with this ability to score these LLM models. So you think about how do you get these metrics? While I talk about hallucinations, how can you actually calculate whether a response is hallucinating or not without putting a human in the loop, right? So this is where we have invented what we call trust models. These are background language models that Fiddler creates. And these language models are like little humans looking at these model outputs and verifying if this model, a given model output is actually hallucinating or if it's having toxic behavior. So this is a very new invention. So this is using LLM as a judge. So you have a generative AI LLM that you're using, but then you have the other language model that is judging the output of the LLM. And here is where we build this trust service that helps you score these LLM outputs. And we are partnering with the likes of NVIDIA in introducing these metrics into the guardrails. So you can use NVIDIA, NeMo guardrails, and Fiddler together to create this observability and guardrails for your LLM application. So I'll show you an example of this, right? Imagine you have a chatbot application that you're building. Let's say you're working with Azure OpenAI and you want to build a generative AI application. Now, how do you make sure that the chatbot is not hallucinating? How do you make sure its responses are grounded and they're relevant, right? So what you need to do at that point is you can integrate Fiddler as a monitoring system. So you can feed all of the questions and answers that you're getting from let's say the OpenAI or Anthropic or whatever is your platform of choice. And then Fiddler will take all of these questions and responses. It will run through this trust service, which is going to score these metrics. How grounded is the response for the given prompt? How safe it is? What is the quality of the response? Is it relevant to the question asked or not? And then it will then help you visualize them in these dashboards. So you can now have a continuous monitoring in place. Now suddenly you can say, you see, oh, there's a spike in hallucinations. So your teams can go and debug and now you'll create a workflow to operationalize these LLMs. So you have the confidence, you have like someone watching for your LLMs. So these are some of the metrics that are important, that we have found to be very important in terms of monitoring. One is a bunch of metrics around hallucinations. So is the answer coherent? Is it relevant? Is it faithful to the underlying source context? There's safety metrics around PII detection, toxicity detection, there's jailbreaking attacks, how do you prevent those things? And then operational metrics, what's the latency, what's the cost, how much are you spending for these inference costs and training costs, and are you getting the right ROI? And those metrics can then be collated into these dashboards that you can then monitor them in one single place and have oversight into what's going on with your LLM apps. So what these trust models will give you is very fast LLM scoring. So one approach to do LLM scoring is, okay, I'm using OpenAI for my generative AI application. I'll also use another OpenAI model to judge the given OpenAI model. Now you're essentially doubling the cost of your running the business, right? You're having your generative AI application, but then you're using another language model, very large language model to judge that. What we have found in practice is, while this is interesting, it is actually very inefficient. You're going to be doubling your generative AI cost. So we have taken the approach of using smaller language models, almost like BERT scale models that are 100 to 200 millions of parameters. And they are specifically fine-tuned to catch these issues. So that helps you, lower your costs. They're also low latency, so you can use them as a guardrail. So if you want to prevent a bad response from going to the end user, you can actually quickly check the score and say, hey, is this response actually accurate? If it's not, if it's above some threshold from a hallucination score, let's not send this response. You can make those business decisions in your applications. So the trust models we are finding very effective. And these are some of the customers that are leveraging them in production today, where they are leveraging them for customer service applications, for identifying, evaluating if a given LLM is better or not. If you have multiple LLMs that you're trying to qualify, which LLM is better, you can try to use these trust models to benchmark it. So it's almost like the benchmarking models for you to sort of judge these, your generative AI usage. So all in all, our goal is to ultimately help companies build responsible AI, right? So the way we think about responsible AI is that has essentially 4 pillars in some ways. You have to have some way of testing your models, because I think these models, they're constantly changing. There's a new model every month that's either in the open source or the vendors. How do you know which model is the right fit for you? So you have to have an evaluation system where you can test these models and benchmark them and understand which is better on a given set of metrics. And then when you put these models into production, you need to have continuous monitoring. We talked about it in this talk. And then you have to have some sort of a security layer that could provide some defense so that you are preventing hackers or malicious actors to hack into those models and extract sensitive data. And then you finally have to have a governance layer that you can report out these model outputs, right? Because a lot of the companies are preparing for the upcoming regulations. There are already states in the country that are starting, AI regulations. So there will be soon a need for having a governance workflow of reporting of these models. So in our view, these are the 4 pillars when you think about responsible AI. And the way we sort of help our customers is to get from operationalization, start with putting a few LLMs into production, build confidence with them, and then go all the way to truly building responsible and trustworthy AI. So with that, these are some case studies. I don't want to spend a lot of time. We have a booth. If you're interested, you can come and talk to us and to understand how our customers are leveraging Fiddler. We believe ultimately that doing responsible AI is going to give ROI to you. There's like two sort of decisions you can take here, right? One is you can drink the Kool-Aid and start on generative AI without any controls in place, and you might actually make a lot of mistakes and you might be taking a lot of risk. Or you can do the other opposite, where you say, okay, we don't want to do anything. Let's just see how the technology matures, and you'll be missing out because your competitors might be implementing this. So the best way is to take the risks into consideration and build the guardrails, and the responsible AI approach is going to give you the right ROI, and that's at least how we believe it. So that's basically my presentation. I'm happy to take any questions here, or if you want to come and stop by at our booth, I'm there as well. Thank you so much. Yeah. I can't see, but if there's a question, please shout. Yeah. Right. Right. Yeah, their own guardrails, their own observability. Correct, correct. Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. 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 Right. Absolutely. See, I think, in my opinion, when it comes to things like oversight and observability, you always want to have a maker-checker sort of responsibility division, right? If I'm developing a large language model, and if I'm ratifying it as actually the best model in place, would you trust it? Because we are a neutral third party, we are not developing large language models. We believe when it comes to observability or validation of these models, you want to always look at a third party and see like how, according to the third party's eyes, is GPT better, or is it Llama better, or is it Anthropic's Claude better? What is the best model for your use case? So that is number one. Number two is, of course, when you're working at Nissan, large enterprises will want to ensure that there is no lock-in, right? You want to make sure that you have optionality. With a separate observability player, you can switch out on your model backends. Today, maybe GPT-4o is the best LLM in the world, but maybe a year from now that might change. Maybe the open source is going to catch up. Llama 3 is already very good, right? So how do you then choose? Already today our customers don't use one LLM. They have multiple LLMs for different use cases. So in that scenario, you would need a common observability tool that can fit in multiple LLM sort of providers or open source LLM models. Does that make sense? Yeah. It's a neutral, common observability tool. And then when regulations come, I think regulators will want to also see like a neutral dashboard, right? Like, how have you validated this LLM, from a third party?
So are you branding yourself as a maker checker or a challenger also?
We are not producing an LLM, so we are not challenging the given LLM. So we are a metrics engine, you can say. Essentially, we are a dashboard that you can, with all the metrics that are relevant, where you can bring your own favorite LLMs and measure how they are working for your use case.
But you will give the performance.
Correct. We are going to give the performance insights, and think about us as like Datadog for AI teams. If you're familiar with like DevOps monitoring tools, like how they monitor your servers and applications, we are monitoring your LLMs and generative AI apps, and also machine learning models. That's still the bread and butter use case for many enterprise companies.
For a minute, and then how effective is the performance? But I actually
So that's a good question. So some of these metrics are also not 100% accurate, right? Because we are using another language model, our own fine-tuned model, to detect if the response is relevant to the prompt or is it actually factually correct to your source data. These models that are judging them can also make mistakes. So we provide benchmarking data to you, to our customers. Say, hey, here's what we benchmarked on these things. Here's what we have found in terms of our accuracy. We're not saying we're the perfect oracle that's going to say we're going to judge everything 100% right. So there is obviously, there'll be some deficiency in the way that's going to be judged as well. But what you will get is, you don't have to spend an army of people looking at your model outputs all the time, right? You're reducing that human review process quite a bit. You can have a model as a first line of defense, like Fiddler or a service as a first line of defense checking it for you. And then you can go and look into the blind spots. Okay, what has it classified as like hallucinations? Let me go and review those things. So you will use your human reviewers much more effectively.
You are able to also detect some like privacy data leaks or something?
Yes. So that is one of the fundamental aspects of LLMs, is they can memorize training data. So there are examples of research where you could basically give in metadata information and even extract similar images that were fed into the dataset. There was like a Netflix movie dataset that people tried out, where you could actually give like movie title names and extract a blurry image that is very relevant to the movie image, because LLMs do memorize this data. Yeah, so that is the holy grail, right? So I think we'll provide you the insights, but we still have the human in the loop. We are not taking the human in the loop. The AI engineer, the model developer, the subject matter expert. You know the best about your domain, how you fine tune the model, how you develop your generative AI app. So our job is to give you the insights so that, is it a problem with you? So the problems can be that, hey, your vector database does not have enough coverage. Maybe that's probably why you're seeing a hallucination come up. Or your prompt engineering needs to be fixed because you have this sort of a loophole where the hackers are exploiting to extract out some and jailbreaking into your chatbot. So those are the insights we can give, but you still need to do the work to go and fix those things yourself. Yeah. Right. 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 Correct. That's exactly what I just answered, right? So the small LLMs, because they're fine-tuned for a specific task, so they're not generative, they're not doing a generational task. So what we are doing with these small language models is, we are using model distillation approach to convert them to a classification model. So what they're so in the case of hallucination, what they're trying to do is, okay, I have the response, I have the prompt, and then I have the source data. Now tell me if this response was, how likely is this response extracted from the source data? So I'm trying to like look at the faithfulness of these things. A simple way to do this is to compute a cosine similarity between these two things, right? But that'll break down a lot on a lot of issues, like it will not catch sentiment, it will have a lot of errors. So a model distillation approach of using these fine-tuned small language models, we found to be much better in terms of providing those accuracies. But again, they're not 100% accurate. We sometimes do not catch some hallucinations, sometimes we have false positives as well.
Yeah. Yeah. She starts at 2:20, so we can start. In 8 minutes, we'll start.
Sorry, performance impact of what? So like how we have helped you improve a particular LLM or something? Oh, so it's not running inline. It's running as a sidecar. So your chatbot is directly calling your whatever LLM backend and getting responses. And Fiddler is monitoring that, right? Of course, there are some customers who want to use these metrics in a real-time manner as a guardrail. In that, you will add a few hundred milliseconds of latency to your responses because you're waiting for the Fiddler scores to check if the responses are correct or not. But if you're using it as a monitoring service, then everything is just offline, happening offline, right? And it's not affecting your runtime workflow.
Better we get up to a break. Yeah. And then
So we provide on-prem deployments. So we provide both managed cloud and on-prem deployments. So if your data should not leave your premises, then Fiddler can be on your environment and none of the data is leaving your environment at that point.
So Krishna, I have a question. So you mentioned that European AI Act
Yeah.
and all the regulations changing around
So,
Yeah.
are your first models keeping track of that? So that there is a model that we have that's very insane.
Yeah.
It's going to tweak it and make sure that it catches all these.
So we are not tweaking the models, but if I can go back to my previous slides, my clicker is not working anymore. But so if you look at the regulations, right, they're very high level. They're not prescribing that, okay, your hallucination check threshold should be 0.5 or your bias threshold should be 0.7, right? They're not prescribing that. They're giving you the guidelines that you have to have a process around doing these things. You have to have a process around testing the models, monitoring them. If you study the executive order from Biden as well a year ago, that was mandating about a process that you have to do this. So how you implement that process is up to the customer. What we believe, and we're working with other regulated customers, is when you have a sophisticated process and sophisticated tools, that you're much likely to impress upon the regulators that you have things covered for you, right? So we are not going and tweaking your LLMs. We show the same type of metrics, whether it's a regulated company or a non-regulated company. But because you're in regulated companies, you would use it also for your, oversight or governance oversight purposes. So we are using the model distillation. We are using a supervised fine tuning. So we are not necessarily reinforce. We are not continuously learning. That's probably in the future. The goal for us next is to. Right now we provide these out-of-the-box trust models, right? But they're not customized for your use case. Your PII, a healthcare company's PII, might be different from an e-commerce company or a financial services company. So eventually, what we want to build is a platform where you can customize these trust models and these trust metrics to your data. So that is when we believe that the accuracy will also be higher, and you'll be able to catch more issues that might be relevant to you. How do I constrain the output of it? What does it mean? Yeah, so essentially, like the approach is like it takes these two blobs of text, and it's basically trying to say, is this blob of text generated by this blob of text? And that's basically what the distillation approach is going to do. And it produces a number between 0 and 1. The higher the number, the higher the relevancy of response to the source data. And the lower it is, the higher chance of the hallucination. So it's basically a faithfulness metric in that way. Okay. Awesome. Thank you so much for the time. Thanks for all the questions. And we have a booth as well here.